Happy Monday, Broncos country. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Broncos. I'm Bree Maestas here with Zach Seegers, Joey Richards. Guys, how are you?
Bree, I am doing fantastic today. Today was a fantastic, great day. Last night, on the other hand, not so much at all. Anthony Edwards is ridiculous. He was giving my Nuggets buckets last night. That's one take I have from this series. I don't care what happened. The Nuggets are up, 3-1 in the series, but Anthony Edwards is a star. He's a star. He has it written all over it. He has made that jump from, hey, I think he could be a star to he's a star. He's ridiculous. But anyways, Gobert, still not good. Cat, still not a center. I'm still waiting for all of that. It won't happen. Nuggets in 5.
Yeah, I'm with Joey. I think the Nuggets take care of business in 5. Last night's game kind of sucked, but it would have been nice if they got the first sweep in franchise history. And I agree. Ant is a certified star. He's the only player on that team that scares me even a little bit. He is.
Kyle Anderson doesn't
really
scare you.
No.
Jordan McLaughlin. No.
A perfectly executed 3-point shot, absolutely ruining any type of momentum there for the Denver Nuggets. But here we're going to talk a little bit of Broncos football. Obviously, a couple days out from the draft. Joey and Frankie are going to be coming at you Thursday for an episode. What are you guys going to be talking about on Thursday?
Thursday, we are
What's
not.
the draft?
That's the first day of the draft.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm going to be doing anything. Catch me on Twitter. You can catch my analysis.
There we
at
go.
Drafts. You can catch Frankie's at Frankie Films. We'll be doing that. And then the Thursday afterwards, catch us for draft, reaction. That's what we're going to be doing. And maybe we do like a Twitter Spaces that day. We have thrown that out there. So
all right. Well, today we're going to be discussing, what are the lessons to be learned from previous Denver Broncos drafts, or maybe, what can be assumed from that in the upcoming draft. Lots to talk about tonight. If you'd like to join in on the conversation, please feel free to do so. If you go on over to the Mile High Sports YouTube or Facebook page, we're going to see all of your comments over there. Ask us some questions, get in on all of the fun. Let's jump right into it, fellas. I want to talk about reaching or making sweeping, bold moves in the draft and how that can or cannot pan out. You make a big reach for a Paxton Lynch, or you trade back for a Drew Lock, and those don't necessarily pan out the way that you hope that they do. Lovely graphic from Zach Seegers here on the screen. I like the little peace sign, throwing that up right there. What do you guys think about making potential sweeping moves in the draft and how they can or cannot backfire in your face when you're a team here in the NFL draft?
All right. Personally, I think that I'm always been against trading up, really, unless it's for like a quarterback or a position of very high value, like offensive tackle or edge. These are positions that matter a ton to a football team, more than the other ones. So I am good on that. I personally think that, trading down and accumulating more picks is the way. There's nothing set in stone in the draft. As much as you think you love a player, the odds shake out to be that you have a better chance of missing in the NFL draft. So just get more. That's always my thing. Maybe if I, it would be easy for me to say while I'm watching other people do it. But if I were drafting, I'm probably trading up every single time. If you've ever seen one of my mock drafts online, I'm probably trading up. I don't like when other people do it though. So I don't have trust. I don't have trust for these people. I don't. So I think that trading down is the way. I'm not a big fan of trading up. The Javonte Williams one, it could have worked out. It didn't. There's just too many trade up things where it's like, how do we know? So I'm not the biggest fan.
Yeah, the best GMs in NFL history, the guys that are in the Hall of Fame, picked a little over 50% on their first round picks. They hit about a little over 50% of the time on their first round picks. Forget day 2, forget day 3. So when you're consolidating, 2 picks, let's say your day 1 picks have a 50% shot. Your day 2 picks have a 35% chance, and your day 3 picks have like a 20% chance. The difference there isn't so great that you should be bundling a bunch of day 3 and day 2 picks together to get a day 1 pick. You are overestimating in your own ability to evaluate these players, because even the very best are wrong half the time. So you should take as many swings as you can, take as many bites of the apple as you can, because that's how you end up hitting 4 or 5 times. Like maybe you just go on an insane heater like George Payton did in 2021, but those drafts are the outlier. Generally, you have your hits and you have your misses. So if you have 14 picks, maybe you have 7 hits and 7 misses. And if you have 5 picks, maybe you only have 3 hits and 2 misses. At the end of the day, how many misses you have doesn't matter. It's how many hits you wind up with. And when you trade up, you're removing picks. If the Broncos wanted to like swap a veteran or something to slide up a little, honestly, that would be more appealing to me for where they are right now.
All right, fair. Joey, what's your lesson to be learned from the Denver Broncos past drafts?
It's that George Payton loves these relative athletic score players, the high athletic. He likes the freak of nature athletes. We can go back, the Baron Browning draft, the Patrick Surtain draft pick. That year in specific, everybody it felt like was a high relative athletic score outside of like Lloyd Cushenberry, right? All of them were good and they've worked out. That's when you have faith in your coaches. Now it can get a little out of control. You don't just draft the freakiest athletes because there is technique. There's these really important things to playing football that matter in when you're evaluating players. It's clear to me that George Payton likes those type of guys. So that's my lesson here is that, hey, while we're going into this draft, look out for that. That's the thing that Broncos country should be looking out for. Who is available and are they a high relative athletic score player? Because George Payton has kind of shown his hand there.
Sorry, yeah, I agree. I think he definitely values his RAS guys. I think he even did it some in this last draft, kind of like you were saying. Greg Dulcich, I think, was one of the better. Not goodness, I'm spacing on the Virginia kid who went to Indy now. Not Isaiah Likely, but Jelani Woods. He wasn't that level of tester, but still one of the better testers in the draft at his position. Wazirike had some of those freakier athletic traits. Henningsen tested really well, if I'm remembering correctly. So definitely has a type there. I hope he goes more to that well in this year, like closer to what he did in 2021 than what he did in 2022. Because in 2021, like Baron Brownie's not just an incredible athlete; he's a 98th percentile guy. Same with Quinn Miners and Surtain and everything. And those crazy elite athletes are hard to find later in the draft, but he still managed to find a good number of them that last year. Jonathan Cooper tested really well. Or is at the very least an elite athlete. I forget if he was able to test with his heart thing. Caden Stearns tested out the gym. Quinn Miners and Baron Browning came in the 3rd round. So I don't know. I hope he goes even harder at that because it worked out great for him before. And now I think he has a coaching staff to support that philosophy and coach some of these raw traitsier guys up.
It's an interesting concept. I have a question for both of you. What are the downfalls of chasing after high RAS scores? Obviously, one of Joey's questions of the day from a couple of episodes back, it might have been a while ago, is the highest RAS score for a Denver Broncos quarterback didn't really pan out in that scape either. Where can you fall short when you go after freak athletics?
Yeah, it's when they're available in the 3rd breed, they're probably lacking in a lot of other areas. that's the downside. If they were really good and their film was tremendous and you had no issues just watching the film, and then they also on top of that were scoring, in the 90th percentile on their freak athlete level stuff, they would be going 1st round all day long. More than likely, even the guys that are getting picked in the 3rd with the high relative athletic score, they're getting moved up because of that score, right? It's not because of the film they've done in the past. You're looking for pops of, really good play when you're drafting those guys that late. But consistency is probably the thing you're lacking in the most. Consistency and technique.
Yeah, I think you got to look for, like Joey said, these guys being drafted that are phenomenal athletes this late are going to have sizable holes in their game. And thank you, Paul, for the comment. But they're going to have sizable holes in their game. There's a reason they're falling this far despite the tremendous traits. So I think it comes down to, do you believe you can develop it up? Those holes in their game, can you fix it up? Can you turn them into this athletic machine you see the potential for? Because that's the reason you're taking the gamble. I would look out for things like player age in that regard, because it's just going to be harder for those guys to get a ton better if they're entering the NFL older. I'd look for injury history. If they have like really serious injuries, that may hamper their ability. I think you look at the guys, like Joey said, there's a reason if awesome athletes are following this late. Quinn Miners didn't play football for a year and then is at this really weird position. Baron Browning was constantly moving around positions in college and could never really find a spot. And you could see that lack of comfortability on tape. Caden Stearns got into this really nasty situation with the UT head coach, and it just like wasn't a good relationship, and he couldn't continue to build on his amazing freshman year. Like, there were reasons that explained maybe the gaps in their game, why they felt that. Jonathan Cooper had a crazy heart condition that, once it got taken care of, all good to go. He's ready to play football. So I think, why are these guys here? Are they here because they have off-field issues and they're lazy and, they don't do the work away from the field? Because that's probably not going to get better once you start paying them millions of dollars.
Zach, you said something that piqued my interest, and I want to just comment on it, and then we'll move on to what your lesson to be learned is. Player age. With the COVID years and with the extra years of eligibility, how does that change the scope of a player's age entering the NFL draft, coming into the NFL, being a couple years older than you would relatively anticipate prior to 2020?
To me, it would make age a premium, or youth a premium, rather. I don't want these guys that. Now, the flip side of this is there are a few, I'm spacing on the names right now, but I know there's a few good defenders in this class. If Frankie's watching, or maybe Joey, you can help me out, that are like 21, 22. Maybe they're offensive linemen. I was listening to a draft preview show. And they have like 4 or 5 years of football experience on them. It's like 22-year-olds, 21-year-olds, or Division I college football experience. That's awesome to me. I love guys that have played a lot of football. I don't like guys that are 25, 26, just because, like, try and learn a language in your 30s and ask like your kids to learn a language, or watch your kids try and learn a musical instrument. And you try to learn a musical instrument in your 40s. Like, it's just, humans learn things at a slower rate as we get older. It becomes harder for us to add new skills to our repertoire. Also, like, just the body development, the brain development too. I think the male brain doesn't develop until like age 25, 26. So if you're drafting a 21-year-old, 22-year-old prospect, there's a lot of hypothetical room for development. They've got a lot of time to figure out those kinks and work and grow, while you draft a guy like Garrett Bowles, who I think is the other priest. You draft a guy like Garrett Bowles, who's on the other end of the spectrum. And like, yes, he finally put it together, but he put it together at age 31, 32. And now he's already on the, back 6 of his career. It's tough.
Yeah. I do think, Zach, you made some really interesting points there. Like, the age, obviously you're looking for younger players, but I do sometimes think that we value it too much, because, and then at the same time, you are valuing these guys a lot of the time 1-year wonders or something like that coming out of college football. And that's just as scary. At least with a guy that's maybe a year older, he's a lot more proven of a product. Like, that is something that should be in there. And you did mention that, Zach. I'm just adding on. I see it all the time where people are like, yeah, but he's this old. It's like, okay, but I'm looking at your top 20 players there, and half of them have only started 1 year in college. It's weird balance. Of course, you're looking for, if you could get the young player that has a ton of college experience, that's the way. But it's not always that way.
Totally. And I also think, but I would still aim to go with the younger player. Now, to your point, if it's 1 year, that's one thing. Where I start to get worried is when I see 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds, 26-year-olds entering the draft, because Just think back to, and maybe if you went to high school in Texas or Southern California or Florida, it's different. But I think, you go to high school and you see like high school football games, it's generally like seniors on the varsity team and juniors. There's not like a lot of freshmen making those. Occasionally, there'll be one good enough, but it's mainly seniors. They're beating up on the freshmen. There's a reason for you look at college football programs, and it takes the freshmen a while to like earn a starting spot. Not all freshmen, some are very elite and get those spots quickly, but that development is still going on. So when I see a guy who's entering the draft and is now finally getting viewed as a third round prospect at age 24, 25, well, he's beating up on 21-year-olds. He has the advantage of that physical development, of that mental development, of those reps to aid him in these matchups while I'm doing that film study. That's an advantage the 21-year-old's not going to have. And, but it's something he can gain. It's an area where you can make up ground once he makes it to the NFL. That developmental, those years like 22 through 24 or 21 through 24 or whatever haven't already been tapped yet. But again, it's not the end all be all. You have to, Joey's 100% right. You have to draft the better players, but it's a thing to consider.
A balancing act.
All right. I've gotten us off on a tangent. It's normally not me, but I'll take full responsibility here. Zach Seegers, what's your number one lesson to learn from the past Broncos drafts?
Yeah, my number one lesson actually kind of beautifully, I think, ties your two together. Breeze was kind of about trading up, moving around in the draft. Joey is about what George Paton wants to do. This is a promise. George Paton will trade down in this year's draft. I guarantee it. This guy loves to have picks. Talking about, again, what we were talking about with Bree. It's all about maximizing your swings at this, maximizing your chances to get on base. That's something George Paton has prioritized his whole career. Even in Minnesota, there wasn't a time they had fewer than 7 picks. The Broncos have 5 right now. How do you add picks? Maybe it is a Jerry Jeudy draft day trade or a Cortland Sutton draft day trade or a Garrett Bowles draft day trade. None of that would surprise me either. But I think they're going to trade back. It could be both, but I think they are going to move back in this year's draft. I will guarantee it. They're going to want to pick up extra picks. And not only in this year, I think they have to understand that if the Russell Wilson thing goes bad, you are entering a rebuild next year. And Sean Payton's going to want some good players on that roster quick. So time to start accumulating draft picks. He will trade down.
I don't hate it. I mean, I already said it. I love it. If he wants to trade down a little bit, yes. What do I want him to take one of those first 2 picks? Absolutely. Like if you were to trade out of both of those, I'm sitting there looking like, what the hell are you doing, man? but I wouldn't be mad at a trade down at all. I think that there's a ton of value in trading down, especially when you do get to those 3rd round levels. It's like, okay, I just want more. Like, just give me more picks. We want more picks. So I love it. I think that there is a great likelihood that they will, just for that same reason. The Broncos need cheap and young players. Like, even if Russell Wilson does work out, it's important that they get more cheap and young players. It 1000% is without both scenarios. So I would like it, and I do think there's a great possibility of it.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Samuel Castro over in the YouTube chat said, I learned that you cannot drink the Kool-Aid all the time. I think that's an important lesson. I think a lot of the time it's sold to the fans that, and anybody really watching and paying attention to the team, that maybe mistakes weren't made or maybe they were, worked out a different way. Zach.
Yeah, I just wanted to, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I wanted to piggyback on that. The media's pretty good at evaluating the draft, honestly. I don't think they're as good at as the NFL, but they're pretty solid. And so you can find pretty easily like media consensus draft boards. Just Google it. Some places might have it behind a paywall, but you should be able to find one somewhere. And you will be able to see just kind of an aggregate of, a bunch of respected draft or media draft scouts and their player rankings. And it's not gospel. There's going to be misses. There's going to be guys they have rated low that hit, just like there are in every draft. There's 5th round picks that end up being stars and 1st round picks that end up being busts. Happens every year. Media consensus board isn't all that different. But what we do see on a regular basis is something with a high degree of correlation. Teams that draft plus value in regard to the media consensus board, meaning we're drafting with our 25th pick and we're getting a guy the media thinks is a top 10 player. We're picking our 70th pick and we're getting a top 40 player. When teams are getting lots of positive value relative to the media consensus boards, they hit. They do really well. When teams are getting negative value relative to the media consensus boards, more often than not, they do really poorly. Denver last year, relative to media consensus boards, was one of the worst teams. Look at our drafting episode just the other day and how many of those were below the average C rating, the overwhelming majority of them. Local media after the draft was like, hey, George Payton's going to George Payton and he loves these guys. And I think we saw all these guys gassed up and kind of over positive. But if you listen to the media takes on it, it was like, whoa, the Broncos did a lot of reaching. This doesn't make sense. And I think that kind of bore out now.
Can I ask real quick, and this is like a little off topic, but I think it's fitting and I think it's important to ask this before this year's draft class or this year's draft. How much impact do you think coaching had on the draft picks in George Payton's first year versus the second year? And did that impact the people they selected at all? Colton Cooper asked a question not that long ago about offensive line coach. And, hey, will this offensive line coach have impact on the pick? I think it would be smart to give your coaches plenty of say when drafting. So now I'm curious if a lot of that we can put on Hackett, and if on that other one we could put a lot on Fangio. I don't know.
Well, I think it's an interesting conversation when we talk about the lessons being learned and what you can expect from different eras of the team. Traditionally, whatever coach is in, whatever is in place to make decisions here, whether it's George Payton, whether it's the organization, the ownership, I think a lot of variables come into play here where you're looking at completely different draft boards or different draft strategies than you would be seeing from, 5 years ago. So I think it's an important conversation to have, and it really does bring to light Coop's direct conversation about having a new offensive line coach in. How much are they going to sway in a certain position? Because Streif really likes to work with these types of players because you want to set them up for success in that general area. You want to be taking into consideration with Christian Parker entering year 3, what is he looking for in his secondary? You don't want to get too far out of line, and that type of mentality is going to change with the regime that's in place. Zach?
I think the best I heard, I think it was Nate Tice talking about it when he was talking about how some NFL draft rooms work. But the way that I've heard that makes the most sense to me, and when I've heard people talk about it that have been in the business, they've described it as the thing that they've liked the best, is a relationship where the coaches go, here's what we're trying to do schematically. Here's what I like in my players. Find me those guys. I don't necessarily want the coaches picking the players, but I want the coaches picking the archetypes. Tell me what I'm looking for, and then I want my personnel guys to go out and find them, because I think coaches have a tendency to maybe believe in their ability to coach things up a little too much. So get the coach to establish the archetype and then go from there. In regard to George Payton, I think, or just in the NFL in general, I think there's two sides of it. There's the quality of the coaching these prospects are receiving, because that's going to impact the rate at how they're doing. And then, of course, the influence in the draft room. I think Vic Fangio, because he was kind of a dead man walking, probably had very little draft room influence. Maybe on some of the defensive prospects, George Payton picked his brain. Like, I think that'd just be a smart thing to do. But I think if Fangio was like, no, pick this guy, I think George Payton would have told him to shove it. Hackett, I think, had more say. I think Payton really believed in Hackett. He wanted that marriage to work. And when Hackett was pounding the table for guys like Greg Dulcich, I think that impacted things. I think Hackett's staff was much worse at developing those players than Fangio's was, though. Sean Payton, I think, is going to be the one making the final decision on these picks. If there's a disagreement in the room, I think Sean Payton's side is winning out. So in that sense, we're going to have more influence from the coaching staff than we've ever had before. But I also trust this coaching staff to develop these players more than I ever have before, at least in the Payton era. George.
Interesting. So I take a little bit of a different stance. I'm wondering now, personally, because when it was funny, you could learn a lot. The Broncos put out those YouTube videos after the draft where it shows you like the draft room, stuff like that. You guys know what I'm talking about? It's like, I forget what the name of it is, but it's great.
Finding content. Broncos or something like that.
Behind the Broncos, I think.
Behind the Broncos. That's what it was. And in a lot of those clips, George Payton in both off seasons has given credit to like in the Fangio one, they were like, I forget which player was it. Was it Surtain where he was like, hey, we got your corner? Like it was like very upfront, like, hey, I know you love this guy. We got your guy. And that happened a lot in the Hackett one too. So, and I'm not saying this is concrete or anything, but it's something to think about. I wonder if more than your average GM, does he lean on your coaches? I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. I'm not, because that could be a good thing. It's just I'm curious if it's a little more than your average GM.
I think the comment, because it was in regard to Surtain, I think that comment might have been just, being friendly, trying to be like, hey, we're on a team here. Because I don't think for a second if George Payton wanted to draft Justin Fields with that pick or Micah Parsons with that pick, or we know Vic Fangio actually liked Micah Parsons, right? Or am I mixing that up? He didn't like him in Payton. Whatever. I think if George Payton was like, no, Patrick Surtain's not my guy. Parsons is, or Fields is, or Mac Jones is, I think they would have been the pick there.
Speaking of Patrick Surtain, he plays into my next lesson that can be learned. If the best player available is there, you take the best player available. You don't want to shy away from that choice. And I think that's going to come into play when we start talking about this year's draft, is that if the Broncos are picking at 67 and the best player there happens to just be available, don't worry about the position and go after it, which I think falls into line with what Joey's been saying, or what Joey picked as his. Joey, how do you feel about best player available?
Hey, man, I have been very vocal about this on this podcast here. I don't think you should be picking positions in the third round. I think there's a few where you're like, yes, we're not, unless it's a ridiculous player, we're not taking it. Just a few. But for the most part, the NFL is ever changing. When like offensive line may not look like it need now, it takes one injury. In the most physical sport in the world, just like running back. Running back didn't look like an issue last year. We thought we had that figured out for the next 4 years. Now we're sitting in a spot where we desperately need a running back. It happens. The positions change year to year, what you need. So you can draft for the future as well. And I think while you're sitting in the third, you're not looking at players as we need you to come in and have instant impact anyways. So just go out there and draft who you think is most likely to be good. That's my take. I think that's the smartest avenue to do here in the third. That's the best way of avoiding these guys that could be complete busts. Because like, while the Broncos really do need a center, yeah, I really think Sean Payton came out and gave Lloyd Cushenberry that extra props, because he's like, yeah, well, center might not be the best player available when we're there. You know what I mean? So I might have to start Lloyd Cushenberry. I have to be ready for that. So I just take best player available there. Of course, it's a little lenient. Like, I'm not taking quarterback in the third round. There's stuff like that. I'm not taking kicker in the first round. But for the most part, best player available.
I generally agree. I do think, you have to be flexible to the situation. Like if there's a center, let's say that it comes time, Broncos are on the pick 67. And I don't know, for the sake of just this scenario, let's say they don't have pick 67 and 68. They only have 67. And a center with a high third round grade is available on the board, and a I don't know, like wide receiver, interior offensive line, tackle with a late second round grade, something like that is on the board too. I still might be tempted if Sean Payton is truly committed, and that's where talking with your coaches and figuring things out. also George Payton's evaluation of where this roster is. If this team is trying to win right now this season, I think it might make sense to prioritize some instant impact situations if the grade is close enough, just because there are some areas like defensive line, like center, like corner even, that I think needs guys that can play right away.
We'll go over to you, Joey. What's your second lesson to learn from previous Denver Broncos drafts?
Well, Zach, that was a great segue. I think that whole conversation was a great segue because my next is that I don't think George Payton cares about positional value. I don't think he does at all. There's a few examples of this, right? Now, I'm not going to sit here and be the guy. I have in the past, but I'm not going to do it anymore. For the time being, unless I get proven right, and then everyone's going to have to hear about it. But I would have taken Justin Fields at the time over Patrick Surtain, and I know tomatoes in the chat, throw them. It's over for me. But it was a great example of me of saying, hey, quarterback is clearly the most important position, and we passed on a guy that I personally thought could be a franchise quarterback. Another example, same draft class. Javonte Williams, not only drafted in the second round, but traded up for in the second round. Great example of saying, hey, we don't care about what you're talking about with this positional value stuff. Greg Dulcich in the third. Tight ends don't really work out very often early on. Usually takes a long time. I can name on like 3 fingers how many elite tight ends there are in the league, yet we're drafting a tight end in the third. You know what I mean? So I think he's proven that it's not his thing. He's not going to worry about what position they're playing. He's going to go out there and take a player that he thinks is good.
Yeah, I think, I fully agree with Joey. George Payton clearly doesn't care too much about positional value. I also do think he is a guy who believes building back to front defensively, and that informs some of how he really prioritizes the secondary players. I do think an interesting kind of flip side of this is that Sean Payton kind of does value those premium positions. He spent a lot of high picks on tackles, on corners, on wide receivers. I'm just looking at the Saints draft history right now.
Also running back, though, Zach Seegers. Also
edge rushers. True, he does have his running back.
Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara.
And he likes some interior offensive linemen too. That was always big, but that was also kind of a premium during the Drew Brees era because he needed that stability up front. But he's a guy that's really prioritized premier position. So even though I agree with your point on George Payton, I wonder if Sean Payton muddies the water some this year.
Since we have a conversation about George Payton going on right now, Paul's question, I'm going to touch on it. And I'm interested because I think that I know where this is going. Paul asked over on YouTube, could this be more of an Elway draft due to his scouts that are still there? I don't know if we'll see a Payton draft until 24. He follows up with, I guess I'm asking, because would Payton want his own scouts in 24, or do you see it as no big deal? I will point out that Eugene Armstrong, who's been with the team for 17 years, I don't think has just been a John Elway scout. I also think that it's not really dependent on necessarily the team specifics of who's making those draft calls, speaking towards George Payton. Obviously, I think the members of the scouting conference, which I believe there's 3 or 4 of them, are delineated in a certain way. They've been doing this job for quite some time, that it doesn't really matter which regime they fell under. A callback to Elway is interesting, but I don't think that they fall under a specific general manager for the team. Guys, any insight on that?
I'm assuming he's lumping in George Payton and all that into this and kind of saying, is this an old regime draft? And yeah, I think I don't know. I think Sean Payton's still going to be making the final say in the draft room, if that's what he's asking about. I think we will see a Payton draft this year, or a Sean Payton draft this year. I think he's going to be the one ultimately pulling the trigger. That said, I think kind of the sales pitch to ownership, if I'm Sean Payton this year, is I'm going to come in and George, oh man, he's such a good player evaluator and talent evaluator. I'm going to work great with him. We're going to be such great pals. I don't know if that's necessarily the truth of the situation, but I think that's the sales pitch to the owner. Yeah. And this first draft you make nice, and you see if George Payton does what you want him to do, and George Payton does a good job. And if George Payton does a good job listening to Sean Payton and ends up finding good players, he might stick around and kind of fall into that role moving forward. I'd say if he gives Sean Payton any reason to fire him, there's a very good chance he's gone after the 2023 season. And then to Paul's point, we are in the Sean Payton under the rule of the Sean Payton regime, and it's going to be Sean Payton drafts all out. You're not going to have a strong player evaluator presence like George Payton kind of balancing him out. Because I will say, if they can figure out the balance, it'll be perfect. I think Payton is a really talented scout, and Sean Payton's a really good head coach. And if they can make that marriage work, I do think it could be kismet.
I guess so. Joey, any follow up to that? You good?
I'm good.
Just chilling. Juan Espinoza just joined. Asked over on Facebook. Good evening, gentlemen, and Bree. Good evening. Do you guys see any surprise moves coming in the draft this weekend?
I think that possibly a receiver could be traded. I said this on the Broncos Avenue podcast the other day, that I don't know, everyone's just buying, Courtland Sutton, he's safe. Literally, if the Odell thing didn't happen, it sounds like he would have been traded. So, I don't understand. They've literally made every single move this offseason to lead us on that these wide receivers could be dealt. It didn't just wake up and change. I promise you, I think that one of them could be dealt. I definitely think so. That if you're looking for a shock, I would say keep an eye on Courtland Sutton and his status. So we're talking Adam Thielen, the Broncos almost signed. They've brought in multiple wide receivers in the draft. They've signed Lil Jordan Humphrey and Marquez Callaway. They're trying to add to that group, and he's been smoke around him the entire offseason. So keep an eye out for that one.
Yeah, I think a player is going to fall to that top of the third round range. I feel like one always does, and it's just going to fall into the Broncos' lap. I don't know if they'll take him, but I think there's going to be a player that Joey and I on who's the UConn guy, Logan Hall, or that was the other defensive front guy. Who's the UConn guy that came out last year?
You just broke up. Oh my gosh, my Ravens guy, my favorite player in the entire.
Yeah.
Why am I spacing on his name? I loved him.
Is it David? I don't know. There's going to be one of those in this year's draft. We were in Vegas last year, and Joey and I are freaking out. Draft him. I can't believe he's there. There's going to be one of those in this year's draft. Like Baron Browning, people were pegging him, Broncos as a Broncos pick, 40th overall before the draft. And then he ends up going in the third round. Lloyd Cushenberry, much the same thing. And that one didn't pan out, but someone's going to fall that we're going to be freaking out and very surprised is there. Maybe a Sam Laporta or a Julius Brents or a Tucker Kraft or something. I could see Luke Musgrave, something like that, an exciting player, maybe one of these more stacked, a Zach Charbonnet. And I would be absolutely thrilled if that happened.
His name was Travis Jones, by the way.
Thank you.
Thrilling. Zach, what's your third lesson for the lessons learned in the draft?
Goodness, Bree, just taking swings. My final lesson is don't expect the instant impact. I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth with something I said earlier about the Broncos prioritizing instant impact, but I think that's so true. They should prioritize it, but understand you're probably not going to get it. It's going to be because you're probably not, because it's a rarity. You're probably not going to find gold, but fuck, if you can, grab
your expectations really high, hopes way up. So that
I'm saying the exact opposite. Target the valuable commodity, have your hopes low, and understand you might get it. Because it's a valuable commodity. I don't understand why this is.
Wait, Zach. We're about to argue real quick. We hate the older players. We're looking for high impact in the third, and then also
I'm trying to think about the draft. the thing about that, you don't go in going like, I want slow, short guys who can't. No, but you understand, yeah, in the 4th round, we're going to have to make some concessions.
Well, yeah, the idea isn't just to draft the bad players. It's that maybe we should just draft. My idea was draft the best players available, and you're saying we need to draft the young, high impact, early 3rd rounders.
No.
It sounded like my dating profile. No, just no shorties. I don't know what to tell you.
No, and I'm happy to clarify that. Earlier, I wasn't saying they have to they have to prioritize instant impact guys. I'm saying I understand if Sean Payton is looking to win now. The Broncos have certain areas where they need instant contributors. They don't have a ton of money left. Those are going to have to come through the draft. So I understand in certain cases, if the grades are close, like you have a center as your 75th player and a guard as your, that's not a great example because those are kind of interchangeable, but like edge or something is like your 65th player. Maybe don't go pure BPA there. If Sean Payton thinks this is a roster that can win now this year, because that, and again, edge isn't the best position, inside linebacker. If it's a position that has instant impact potential, I'm fine fudging the margins on BPA if I'm looking to win right now.
And Zach and I are not that far off. I'm just giving him a hard time. So.
Yeah, and I'm going to swat it away.
We're like really close. And like what
he set himself up for it. He said, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth right now, and then just went for it. So it was open game at that point. That was your please continue, Zach, on your final lesson of the draft.
To chum in the water. And I don't think I even did. Yes, they should prioritize guys that should help right now, as I think every NFL team should, but understand that, where they're picking, they're probably not going to get it. Look at their draft last year. The only guys that really contributed at a high level immediately were Damari Mathis and Greg Dulcich. And like Greg Dulcich wasn't fully around. He was dealing with a lot of injuries. Damari Mathis was only in that role because he was forced into it due to injury. And he greatly outperformed expectations. That wasn't a pleasant surprise. It was a pleasant surprise. That was not what we thought a 4th round corner would look like in year 1. So understand that guy they take at pick 67 might have a rookie year similar to Nick Bonito, where it's a rotational role and we're kind of underwhelmed by it. And that's not the most exciting thing ever. It's kind of a damper to end things on, but just don't get your hopes for year 1 too high. That doesn't mean the draft class is going to be bad, mind you. It could be a very good draft class, but 3rd round and on are projects. So expect them to be projects.
Okay.
You got to temper your expectations.
No,
I'm right in line with that.
Yeah, same. Like I totally agree. I'm going to be so sick and tired.
Didn't a second go.
I'm going to be so sick and tired, everybody, guys, when this 3rd round rookie doesn't look good in game 1, and then everybody's calling him a bust on the timeline. It's going to piss me off. It's going to happen.
God forbid you give him a C-, Joey. You better be nice with your grades. God.
I know, right? Hey, yeah. Anyways, check out our rookie report cards on the Let's Talk Broncos Twitter. Those just came out a lot of C-. Anyways,
please go follow us. If you're watching right now and you don't follow us, something's wrong, and I will find you and I will personally scorn you. I don't care if you're into that sort of thing. Lastly,
save it, Bree.
Lastly, everyone's favorite time of the evening. Joey's question of the day. I'm sorry I haven't eaten. I'm so hungry.
It is everybody's favorite time of the day. I don't know if this is a hard or easy question, guys. I don't know. Okay. But this is a player. I'm asking you pretty much, who was the Broncos' 1st round pick in 2013? And I'm going to give you guys a little clue if you can't get it off right off.
I know it off the bat, Joey.
Okay.
Just say
it. It's Sylvester Williams, number 92 out of the University of Northern Carolina. And they picked him 23rd overall?
Yeah. It was 28th overall.
That's disgusting. Oh. I want you to know right now how I'm not even impressed. I'm absolutely disgusted by your ability to just spout it off like it's
Yeah.
information just scrolling behind your eyelids.
Well,
Yeah.
Bree,
I hate you, Zach Seegers. I hate this game. I hate this podcast.
Okay,
well,
well then
Bree,
who was the
it's Sylvester
Broncos
Williams. We
fifth?
have to know.
Who was the
It's
Broncos
a
fifth
legend.
round? Yeah, but you can't get that one.
In the 5th round of that year's draft,
Yeah,
2013.
you're not gonna get it.
So he wasn't a notable player even.
No, this
Let's
guy
say-
is like, I mean, it says 2013 to 2014.
Oh, Mitch Unrein.
Move on.
Wow. Slander. Catching
Oh,
strays.
One of the Tulane corners, whose name I can't remember now.
No,
Who is it?
Quantaris Smith. He's a defensive end. And yeah, that's all the info I got on him. Let's see.
Living legend. Living legend.
It's one sentence. There's not a Wikipedia page.
Yep, that was the 1 year he played in the league too. He had
Hey,
two passes.
played in a Super Bowl. Shout out Quinteros.
What in the world? All right, well, yeah. That's what we got.
Where can everybody find your stuff?
That's what we got.
Where can they find your stuff, Joey?
Oh, yeah, everybody, please follow me at JR Drafts. Make sure you're following the Let's Talk Broncos page. That's at the LTB Pod on Twitter. We're releasing different questions on there all the time. I think it's fun. So, yeah, those are my two big things. Make sure you're following all of it, all Let's Talk Broncos related stuff. That's including at Frankie Films. So everybody, we're doing a great job over here. Pat on the back to you guys.
Absolutely. Very exciting things going on over at the Let's Talk Broncos podcast right now. And the only way to make sure you are getting it all is go over to either our YouTube, Let's Talk Broncos, or just wherever you listen to podcasts. Type in Let's Talk Broncos. If you enjoy our live streams but aren't able to catch them all, you can bring us along for your daily commutes. So check us out there. I've also got lots of Buffs coverage. Man, Buffs news is crazy right now. We had the spring game. Now the sky is falling. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. If you want to know what's going on with Boulder and why it's actually not the end of the world and why they're really just fine. And like even the biggest losses from today are not all that damaging as I really kind of start combing through the bones of the roster. Go over to milehighsports.com and you can find that analysis over there.
Wonderful. You can catch Zach Seegers and myself on the Fan Cave from Mile High Sports Radio, 1 p.m. on Mondays. We had a fun episode today. You can catch that over on milehighsports.com or on the Mile High Sports Twitch page. Go over there, subscribe so you can catch our faces on Mondays. And then if you're already here on YouTube, go ahead, set that notification, and we will catch you on the next episode. Follow me, Bree Maestas 303. I'm not going to run through all my stuff. You can find it over there. Good evening to you. We appreciate you, and good night.